we are back. It has been less than 5 minutes since we recorded the last episode, so I lied. But we are back for episode 4 of Secret Invasion. It's me and Brandon, so if you're following over from episode 1, 2, 3, or 4, Robert's not here for episodes 3 and 4, maybe longer. We're all up in our roots, so he can't make this week, unfortunately. But again, his opinions will be somewhere in our podcast whenever he comes back for Secret Invasion, whether that's episode 5 or 6, or whether we do a roundup episode of his thoughts. But again, it's just me and Brandon this episode. So,
That's right.
this one, hopefully a little bit more engaging, because I actually know what I'm talking about for this one. And
I think more stuff happened as well.
And it's a more engaging episode, I thought, in general.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so obviously, we'll go spoiler-free again, and then at some point we'll have our little alarm, and it'll be the spoiler portion. But I think, in general, this episode I thought started off pretty strong. I don't know if that's the right word, actually. Maybe not started off strong. There were elements in the start that started off strong, and there was other elements where I was like, what the fuck? But
yeah, things consistently happen in this episode that kind of keeps you intrigued, I think, compared to maybe the last 2 episodes where not too much happens, and you're like,
right.
how do I even summarize this episode, kind of thing. I think enough happens here where you're consistently like looking forward to, oh, okay, where is that going to lead to? Okay, alright, I see, now this has happened, kind of thing. Yeah, no, I think that.
Where would you roughly rank this in terms of the first 3 episodes in quality?
I don't know. I think the first half it had a good chance of being probably my favourite, but I think the second half kind of
shite.
I wouldn't call it bad, but like it's just
no,
it feels very small scale, and I'm like, okay, right, whatever.
I don't even think the scale is the problem. I think for me, I think the first half of this episode, there are threads that they carry on that I like, and there are threads where I think they've just completely dropped the ball. Maybe how they're executed, or even just how they were written in the first place.
Yeah.
And then towards the end, I think this episode kind of just lost me towards the end. But we'll get into that. So, this is a hard episode to gauge for me because there's some like high highs in terms of where the series has been.
Yeah.
But I also think this probably has some of the lowest points in the series so far.
Oh, interesting. Well, can't wait to get to that, mate.
Okay.
Yeah, man.
I mean, is there anything else you want to say for
I don't know what else to say for non-spoilers, to be honest. Non-spoilers is kind of hard to do, because it's like, if you sum up something that you kind of need spoilers for. But
I mean,
I think it keeps with the consistency, I think, a little bit. But obviously it depends. I don't know what your opinions are going to be going in, so I don't know if you like this less or more. But like you said, it's a little bit of both, so.
I'm glad that our spoiler-free portions have been quite succinct today.
Yeah.
So, there you go, spoiler-free people. Your time is up. Your time is up. Come on, motherfuckers, get out of here.
Alright, so Gaia's alive.
It's spoilers, right? Yeah.
Gaia just wakes up.
Just fucking, yep. Just alarm clock, just Undertaker's, mate. Just completely just sits up. She's fine.
Which, honestly, I am happy about, because I do like her in the show, but it takes away from the big surprise death last episode.
Yep.
Yeah. The issue is
it feels a little bit like they purposefully didn't show us enough information and then retroactively put that information into this episode, which is really, really fucking annoying. Thing is, I get that's how I don't know, like some things do this well. I don't think this was done well.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really odd to just have her wake up and show her like the extremist virus kind of like heal her.
Well, yeah,
That's
because
fine. It makes
at
sense.
the end of this episode, Gravik gets shot and he instantly heals. So why doesn't she instantly heal?
Well, not only that, but I mean, I guess I never even thought of that. But my point is just because something logically makes sense within your world doesn't mean that's the best choice to use. Just because you can have her killed as a hook, and there's a mechanism to bring her back from the brink in the next episode, doesn't mean that's the right choice narratively. Yeah. It's don't do that, because you've purposely upped the stakes by killing a protagonist, and to my I'd seen, obviously, I was convinced she was dead. Obviously, they'd sprinkled in hints that the extremist virus was around and that the Skrulls had access to it, but I never connected those dots, and I actually think a lot of people online hadn't connected those dots either, because I like watching Easter egg videos and stuff like that, like Train Crush and all that, but I never seen any of them point out like, oh, maybe she's alive. It was always like, oh, well, I hope she doesn't come back. So I think that was the general consensus, with that the audience didn't want her to come back. Like, probably would have rather had, in the best case scenario, more of her in the show before they killed her off. But if they were going to kill her off, just keep her dead.
Yeah.
Because it feels weird for your sticking point of episode 3 to be, right, we're up in the stakes, protagonist is dead, and you're aware of that, but then the next episode, it seems like you're not aware of that because you just brought her back and you've instantly lowered the stakes again.
Mm-hmm.
It feels really strange. It does feel like being duped a little bit, which is really annoying.
Yeah.
But like, I'm the same as you. Like, I'm glad she's back, but I'm not glad the way they did it.
Well, it come. I was fine with it until the end of the episode, weirdly enough, because I'm sure we'll get to a lot more, or we can just skip to it. Valos gets freaking shot up or stabbed and potentially dies? Question mark? Yeah, I think it's safe to say maybe. Um, so I don't know about that. Freaking Ben Mendelsohn, the freaking highlight of the show, getting freaking killed off episode 4.
All I could think about watching the episode was Brennan's fucking voice in my ear going, highlight of the series. He's the highlight of the series, and that's all we've talked
Yeah,
about so far is
yeah.
Ben Mendelsohn and Samuel Jackson.
And then you hear
And
Robert saying, "Yes, more death, please, more death."
man, fuck Robert.
Kill them all. Kill
But
them all.
like for one, I feel like that should be an episode 5 death maybe, rather than episode 4 death.
But you update your subscription every 4 weeks, Ryan, so
I don't
we
give a
need to
fuck
end it
about
on a big one.
I don't give a fuck about subscriptions. Suck my dick, right? Why is Talos dead, right, motherfucker?
Why is Talos dead?
Literally the one.
Assuming that he is like actually done
I mean,
deed.
if they're doing me dirt, thing is, if they bring him back, I'm gonna feel done dirty anyway, again, because they've just done the same thing.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know. I think I'd rather have him back just because I like him as a character and I like his vibe and I like everything he's been in so far.
He's easily the highlight of the show for me, like going forward. Like,
Yeah.
Nick Fury's great, but like Talos is my favorite part.
Which
And to think he's not going to be in it, it's going to suck.
The thing is as well, right? This is what like character deaths are supposed to feel like a void, right? That's the point in them, is when they're gone, you're supposed to miss them. The problem is, I don't think I'm going to miss him because the right reasons. I'm going to miss him because he was the only part I was really invested in. Like
100%. No, like that. I mean,
it's not good. Because I'm not looking forward to the new episodes if he's not going to be in them.
yeah.
Unless they can obviously wrangle up some other thread that's going to be as intriguing.
Mm-hmm.
Which,
because there's a difference, right? Because it's like, for example, for assuming everyone else has seen the Marvel films, Black Widow dies, right? And you feel the void, but you're supposed to feel the void because she was like the heart of the team, you know. It's not because she's the only one you liked. You know what I mean? You liked everyone.
Yeah, that's true.
This feels like he's the only guy that I was really invested in, and now it's taken out. So obviously it's hard to judge now because we haven't seen episode 5 and 6. We don't know what it's like without him. But I can just assume it's going to be pretty rough because the banter between him and Nick were the highlights, and just even Ben Mendelsohn on his own doing his stuff was the highlight. Again, I'm assuming he is dead because how they can't really explain that one. You know, like, oh, he's got powers too. He didn't take the thing, so I do think he's dead. My point was, though, to relate to the beginning of the episode, is that I was really into the idea of Talos thinking his daughter's been killed. So, like, for example, Gravik torments and be like, "Oh, I killed her. I killed her. What are you going to do? You can't. How can you protect other Skrulls when you can't even save your own daughter?" I thought he was going to do something like that, and then Talos was going to go ham on Gravik. But now they can't do that. Like, that whole part is taken out. I thought there was going to be a whole sort of false revenge kind of thing. Or revenge story or something.
They also set up in the last episode with, well, not even the last episode, but that's basically the point of Talos in this series, right? Is that that is a big sticking point for Skrulls not being with him, is that they're like, oh well, your daughter defected, so like, how the fuck can we trust you?
Yeah.
Like, why should we if your daughter can't? And it's like, I feel like that would be easy, like you say, like easy fire to stoke on Gravik's part to get a reaction at Talos. Like,
Hmm.
I didn't think of that idea. That you obviously thought of that, but that's a good idea. Like,
Yeah.
why didn't they do
Because I
that?
thought that was I thought that was like the natural progression of the thing. Because like in the last episode, they're at the dinner table, and he was constantly tormenting him about Gaia, and then he kills her, or at least he thinks he did. I would assume he was going to torment him about like, oh, guess what I did, and then we're going to get some character development of Talos. But no, we're not going to have
It
that,
was not to
and
be.
all just kind of felt pointless. So
I
like, what was the
honestly,
point in killing her then? Like, what was the point of having that whole part of the end
it
of episode
well,
3?
this is the point. It was for us. It was for us.
Stupid, man. Stupid. Like, I'm
The
fine with it if it leads somewhere, but now it's not going to lead anywhere except, oh, you
it was
killed me.
probably a it was probably a, an it was probably a good way to, well, not a good way, but it's probably a way to reveal that she's now a super Skrull as well, I guess.
I guess, yeah.
Speaking of, I think the powers in this are ass.
Yeah, the
It,
CGI is not
not
good.
not not specifically the CGI, because I do have a note about other parts of the CGI that didn't work for me in this episode, but those are
Hmm.
nitpicks. I'm not gonna. I'm more interested in the actual, like, what they're doing, because Gravik using like Groot powers just
Yeah.
doesn't sit well with me. Like,
It's too weird. I'm sure they do it in the comics, but I much prefer the sort of, as we say, secret invasion part of the
well,
show where
I
they're
feel like
infiltrating governments
if
and
they're
stuff.
gonna
Like
have
that's what
powers
I'm
though,
looking after,
it should
looking
be
forward to,
if they're gonna have powers though, I feel like it should be something more
like Super Soldier esque
like
or something.
elemental. Like, like it should be like more like, because I think in the comics the first powers they take are the Fantastic Fours,
Oh,
and those seem like a better power set to kind of lead with, where you have
yeah,
like a kind of like fire, especially that kind of thing. Like, I guess those
yeah.
kind of powers sit better with me as like a Skrull superpower.
The
Like,
thing is,
just
I get why
actually
they're
just
doing powers because obviously they're preparing for the Avengers to get involved, right?
you know
Or in case they get
sure,
involved, so they're like
but
prepared for that. But
it makes no. I'm okay with them getting powers. It's the powers they're using. You know what it feels like, right? And this might absolutely hit, or it might completely miss, but it feels like a character creator in a Lego game where
right,
you're
yeah,
just you're just taking another character's power and just transplanting it onto yours, and then you can
mm,
just use that power. It just feels like they went into a Lego game and went, Groot has the ability to like grab shit with branches. Let's put that
yeah,
on Gravik. And it's like, again, you've not really established how we get there. It's kind of just when, oh, they were investigating powers and now he has them. But
yeah,
like, Groot's powers to me is like, Groot is a tree. It's not that he can like spawn tree matter. Like, he can, but he grows, right? He's already a tree.
yeah.
Gravik is not already a tree. So like, what power has he taken?
Don't know, man.
Because he's not a tree. Like, Groot's a tree and he grows and it makes sense and it looks fine because he's just extending himself as he is.
Yeah,
I know you get like Kaiju Groot, where it's like he's just like thinning himself out to make himself look
he's
bigger.
he's essentially Mr. Fantastic, just a tree, you know.
Right.
So, but
But
that's like
Gravik doesn't
he
have tree
stretches his
matter.
arms and stuff, you know.
Gravik is like appears as a Skrull, and I get he can shapeshift, but like I
Yeah,
don't I don't get how he becomes wood. Like,
yeah, that's
it's
silly.
odd. It's odd to see. I thought the effects weren't terrible, but they weren't like great either. They didn't really bother me, the Groot ones in particular.
Yeah,
It was a bit jarring to be like, oh fuck, like, because the other thing is, I feel like when you do this as well, like, in a roster the size of the MCU, having unique powers is an important thing to be able to differentiate people as
hmm.
well as their character.
And they're struggling with that right now as well because we're having a lot
Yeah,
of duplicates.
and if you and if you are now just have a way to duplicate people's powers, that kind of opens up the Pandora's box of like, oh well, anyone can have anyone's powers,
It's just
if sort of
boring,
thing.
mate. It's just boring to watch. Like, oh, another guy that can regenerate. Oh, another freaking stretchy guy. Like, whatever. Like, it's just, I'm so over it. I'm so over it. Especially like the ones that directly are related. So, for example, I'm sure Ironheart's a good character in the comics and stuff, but it's just a beta Tony Stark. Like, let's be honest. You know, I mean, I feel like we're just getting more of that as the Marvel's going.
Yep.
Um, and it's just not enjoyable because it just makes me think of the better version of that,
It's
and
like
we're
a
never
greatest
going to
hits
get the better
album.
version of it because
Yeah.
the better version's past. So
it's like a well, it's not even like a greatest hits album. It's like a cover version of a greatest hits album.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I mean that's maybe a bit harsh because it was just like a throwaway scene. I get like not a throwaway scene, but it was a very short scene, but
But
it was
I'm
important.
assuming it's going to lead into more stuff. Like,
Exactly.
I'm sure the finale's going to be riddled with all that sort of stuff, so.
But it does feel a bit like the thing is right. It does feel a bit like I said, character creator, but it also feels a bit like Fantastic Four 2, where like Johnny Storm just takes everyone's powers. Like that
Mm,
worked in that film because you only have like four powerful users, right? But like when you open up the roster to like, oh, these Skrulls can have like almost anyone's powers. Like I know
yeah.
we've been shown four explicitly, like the Extremist, Groot, Obsidian, Cull Obsidian, and there was one more. I can't remember exactly what it was.
Mm,
But we've been explicitly shown these four powers, so I'm expecting those four powers will show up in some degree.
yeah.
But like if you can just steal like what Groot does, it just seems a bit odd, and it's like Skrulls are already kind of like semi-generic with like their powers, where they're like shapeshifting Captain Americas.
Yeah.
They're already like super strength and all that. But I don't know. I think well, if we just stick on because it's an important part, right? It's towards the end of the episode, but it's a really important part. So I think sticking with that. I think not just the fact that they've killed Ben Mendelsohn. In my mind, they have killed Ben Mendelsohn. He's not alive. But even though like we're saying, oh, there's a void now, we're not looking forward to the next things. I also just didn't feel like this scene. Like if you were gonna kill him, like I never got the reaction that I was expecting to have from killing a character that I liked in the series.
Yeah.
It felt really flat for me,
Yeah.
where it was a bit like Indiana. Well, this is kind of spilling over into the Indiana Jones episode, but by the end of that film, I was very like, you can do whatever the fuck you want. I actually don't care anymore. Like
Yeah.
I was just like, because there's obviously things at the end of that film that really annoy a lot of people, but those things don't annoy me because I was already checked out, and that's kind of how I feel here, where I'm like, as soon as I realized they were killing him, I'd already checked out, but it wasn't because they were killing him. It's just the way I don't know. It felt like they wanted me to have a reaction, but I wasn't having that reaction.
Yeah, because
I don't know
the
if you felt
point
the
is
same
like,
way.
oh, he's risking his life to save the president of the United States, but like we don't know this character. We don't care per se. I know it's a big deal, but I know it's going to lead into like Nick Fury like telling the president like, oh, a Skrull died for you. Not just any Skrull, my best friend. He's going to do something like that, and that's how
I
Skrulls are
also
going to get rights or whatever on Earth. Like I'm sure
right.
that's going to be what's going to happen.
I think you're
But
right. I think probably something that would have aided that point better was in the president's like delirium while he's waking up, he sees that he's been protected by a scroll.
yeah,
That he's not sure of exactly what happened, but he knows that something like this green alien has
hmm
like protected him in some way, and he wakes up and he's like, "Whoa, what a weird dream." And Nick's like, "No, that was fucking real."
yeah,
So, because now it's going to be a bit like, "Oh, well, his word's against everyone else's, right?" Because it's going to be like,
yeah,
but you also have this thing where Nick's. I don't know if this is where they're going, but like Nick's like you say, probably going to try and appeal to the president to try and get Skrull rights because the Skrull saved the president by sacrificing himself. But
yeah,
another big point in this episode, which we'll get onto, is that Don Cheadle has dirt on Nick Fury, and he's willing to frame him for Maria Hill's murder if he steps out of
yeah.
line. So, like, I guess that's where that's going to come in, is that as soon as Rhodey twigs that that's what Nick's going to do, that's going to come into play as well.
Yeah,
But I just
yeah.
felt it was really that whole sequence just felt kind of
I, I thought the bit where like the I'm just gonna call him the army man, where he's like, "Oh my god, it's an alien! Let's shoot it!" And he's like,
that
"No!"
was funny. Yeah,
I find that funny. I just find it funny how quickly he changed his mind. He was like, "Okay,
he's
I
with me.
trust you,
He's
Nick
with me.
Fury.
It's like motherfucker, you're not
I
even wearing
trust
your
you,
eye
Nick
patch.
Fury." He's been like
Yeah,
fired from service this week. Like,
yeah.
oh,
It's a good
yeah,
thing that this guy knows who Nick Fury is, considering basically no one should know who Nick Fury is, right?
yeah, just trust this random dude.
He's with me, and who the fuck are you? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. I did think that scene was a bit over the top as well. Like all of the rocket launchers, like you getting like a like a tracking shot with the rockets, like every time one is fired, felt
Yeah.
a little messy to me.
Like when
Um,
they shot the car from was it a plane or a helicopter? I thought
Helicopter.
they killed the president, and I was like, "Oh!" I
Oh
was like,
yeah,
"Okay, this is a bit. Oh, what are they gonna do here?" Like kind of thing, right? but no, then they saved them. But obviously, I know where they're going with it. Like we said with the whole Ben Mendelsohn death. But
To
yeah,
keep
I think it was
to
just
keep on the train
it
of
was just like mediocre action
yeah, to
sequence.
keep on
People
the
shooting.
train of weird weird comparisons. This show, and I think Marvel in general, is starting to feel a bit like the dog from Tom and Jerry to me, where like at the start of the episode he's presented as like a menacing force, and he has like big gnashing teeth, but when
Yeah.
as soon as those teeth come together, they shatter.
Mm.
Like, you know what I mean? Like like you say, like they put forward the premise of, oh, Gravik has just killed the president of the United States. Fuck. Like the tension that we had from the submarine and stuff before, that's now just been followed through in like one rocket missile, and you're like, oh fuck, okay.
Yeah.
But then the scene keeps going, and the dog loses its teeth. You know, like the consequences aren't as rash. Obviously, there's still going to be consequences, but they're not as rash as they were first presented as. And it's just, again, it just feels like they're maybe not pulling the rug from under you, but they're edging that rug from under your feet, and you can feel it moving, and you're like, come on, like just let me stand here, motherfucker, and watch your show and make it good. Like it really, I'm starting to see like scenes in the show where I'm like, I can tell what they're trying to make me feel and make me do, but I'm not feeling these things. And the better version of this show should be a seamless version where I'm like, oh, you're making me feel these things rather than I'm realizing you're trying to make me feel these things.
Yeah.
I think just to stay on that scene in particular and then maybe move on, because I don't have much else to say apart from that. But in terms of the actual production, I noticed a few weird things. Like, I think in general, this episode, I don't notice this episode, but it's probably consistent with the other episodes, is the color grading fell off in this episode, or in this
Okay.
series. Like, the colors are very. I get it's a spy show, like a spy thing, and I guess, like, the recent James Bond films have kind of been a bit dull in terms of visual, like the color as well, like the color grading as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's just the market. I'm not that into spy stuff, although I kind of like the idea of doing like sci-fi spy stuff in this series. But
Mm.
I feel like it's off because it just looks really dull. And like, I get Loki is a much more wacky show, and Guardians of the Galaxy is a much more wacky premise, so they're allowed to be very extravagant with the way they use color. But this
Yeah.
show just looks fucking dull. And I get they're in Britain, and like, Britain can be pretty fucking dull, like, right? But it doesn't have to be. Like, it just feels like
Yeah.
a very dreary, dull time. And I get that's the tone of the thing, but it's not always the tone of the thing, and it still feels like you're sucking the joy out of everything in the show.
Mm.
And especially during that fight, I think you get that. I've noticed this in like fan films. You get like a particular way the colors look in fan films, and they're very cold colors, very blue, right? And
Yeah.
when you have CG mixed in with that, you get a very like cheap looking product.
Oh
And
yeah.
I that's the vibe I get from this final scene is you have like okay CGI. Like the Air Force One looked okay in the background, but I could definitely tell that it wasn't like that well done. It felt very like not I wouldn't say PS2, but it maybe felt like PS4, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you have like the one that really stood out to me was the Range Rovers that came in. Like halfway through the fight, there was three cars that come in and right into the middle of the battle,
Mm.
and they looked really fucking bad. Like I don't know,
I
like
see.
I don't know exactly why. I don't even know if they were real cars. And because I noticed this as well with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull when we watched it recently. When you go behind the scenes, a lot of these things are actually done practically, but the way the film looks makes them look like shitty CGI, even though it's actually a real thing. And I'm like, how the fuck have you done that? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's that these are actually real cars and somehow they look wrong, or if these are actually
Interesting.
CG cars. I'm inclined to say CG because they look bad, but they didn't look good. Um, and I
Hmm.
noticed that, and I thought the other thing was is the sound mixing at the end of this episode felt really weird. Like the levels felt really off, like between the score, the action, and the dialogue. It felt really off for me. And I noticed this in Spider Verse. Obviously, there was a whole thing with specific theaters had specific issues with
Right.
sound. I noticed that in Spider Verse, but obviously you guys didn't. So maybe you just had a better theater.
I
In my
experienced it at
theater,
the
it didn't.
start of the film, but I don't know if that was intentional or not.
Yeah, but
Um,
and to be honest, I've not noticed. This isn't a criticism of the whole series. This is just of this specific scene. I think I've not been looking for it,
Yeah.
but I noticed it in this scene. Is the sound felt really off. It felt like really like flat, and it felt like explosions that should be really punchy
Hmm.
were just really like mellowed out. And I felt like it was really strange that you have these high stakes, and you have this kind of Captain America Winter Soldier vibe where everything in that has like momentum behind it, right? There's a lot of momentum behind like punches and kicks and knives and all this and that film and explosions and guns. They're all very like punchy, and this
Yeah.
felt very not that, which was disappointing because I felt like if you were if you're shooting like 12 rockets in a 3 minute scene, I want to be feeling those explosions through the TV.
No, I
Like,
get you. Yeah.
so I think that really bugged me. But obviously that's more of a production thing than an actual like narrative or plot thing. But
Yeah.
that could just be personal preference as well. So,
Well, all right. Well, fair enough. Fair enough. I
but
didn't notice those things, but if you did, maybe other people did. Um, yeah, no, fair enough.
is there
Um,
anything you'd like to add to that scene? Or I think a good segue would be the roadie scene.
well,
If
yeah, I
you
was just
haven't,
gonna say, I think Rhodey. So we need to talk about Rhodey. So
there's
I
something about roadie, yeah.
I don't I can't comprehend that being the same Rudy from the rest of the MCU. It's a complete character change. And I get why he would have a character change in this series if he is the same character throughout, but it just feels like such a like it just seems so different. And I bring back the point I made in episode 2 where he's at the courtroom scene. He just seems like he acts different there and before that compared to when he fires Nick Fury onwards. It just feels like a different character, and that's kind of where I'm on the same boat where I do feel like he's been swapped out in between those scenes with a Skrull. And I know we hate that idea because it just takes away of like the idea of oh, we're going to use the Skrulls, but we're just going to. It's not that they've interfered with the rest of the MCU. It's just going to be this one project they've interfered with, which we don't like. We want to interfere with the rest of the series. But it just doesn't make sense to me how that could be the same character. It just seems like a
Yeah,
complete detachment to him. But I don't know if
I'm
you have the
struggling to
same
hear you
thoughts.
again,
I
Brandon.
don't know. What's your thoughts on
Yeah,
sort of
you
Rudy's?
were cutting out a lot there. Again,
Wait,
maybe you can come back quickly.
yep.
Uh, I thought there was some okay character stuff done here where um I kind of liked that you had the Skrull showering in the Skrull body,
Hmm.
and then he changed into Rhodey once he'd like, so he when he's cleaning himself, he's like in his own body, and then once he's done, I got the impression that he felt like dirty going back into a human body, even though he just cleaned, sort of thing. I don't know if
Did you
that's what they
not?
were putting forward,
Did you
but
not get the feeling that the Skrull was a bit feminine? I did. I don't know if it was to do with the towel because they wrapped it around like their chest, whereas men typically don't do that, right?
I missed completely what you said there. Sorry,
So
Brandon.
I found the Skrull version to be a little bit more feminine than
Right.
Rudy, for example.
Um.
So I don't know if that just comes into my theory that it's not him, but yeah, I don't know. I just because when the person showed up in the shower, I was like, oh, who's this? Who's this character? I don't remember there being like a female besides Gaia that's like a main factor. And then
Is
once
it
they're
Talos'
ready,
wife? Did
well,
she not die? Has she been Rhodey the whole time? Is Rhodey
yeah,
actually with Talos?
imagine
That would be
that'd be
dumb.
in the same scene. Um, yeah, no, I don't know. I'm intrigued for sure because I just don't believe it's Rudy or Rudy. I don't know how you say his name. I keep swapping. Um, yeah, I
What do
don't
you
know.
mean?
But like you
What do you
said, I
mean you
did
don't
like the
believe
scene though
it's?
with him and Nick Fury though. I did like the scene between them because the context was pretty good, and it
You
um
know,
they show the whole scene of him killing Maria Hill,
right?
which we did say was a bit like we were saying that ages ago, where well that should be a factor within the government because I was like, well they could show this, but they just haven't. So then I don't understand their point of view, but now they have, or at least they've got it
Using it as leverage,
behind
yeah.
closed doors. So
Um,
it's good to know they've not just forgotten about that whole part.
I liked their scene in that room, and I liked because I kind of knew that obviously there was going to be something to do with the drink, right? They put forward poison, but it's a tracker in the end. But
Mm.
one, if you have a trace like a liquid that's traceable, you don't need to be in a room with him to give him that drink. Just pour it in some glass of water that he's going to drink at some point during the day. You don't need to be in the room with him, but you need to have the scene with him for story's sake or whatever, just
Yeah.
for to keep it interesting. Fair enough. The other thing is Samuel Jackson's kind of been ebbing and flowing in this series between oh yes Nick Fury and oh Samuel Jackson to me.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
And
Yeah.
this episode, well, this scene anyway, he felt like the slave guy, the like the slave guy from Django Unchained. I can't remember his name.
Right.
You know, like the really old slave that
Yeah,
Leonardo
yeah.
DiCaprio was like, kind of like
The butler kind of character.
Butler, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, like his black ass, or whatever. And they were like, there was like that kind of comedy, that kind of character was coming through Nick Fury, and I was like, it feels like this is a Samuel Jackson and not a Nick Fury. And I'm like, but
Yeah.
are they doing that because, like, I have a feel, I don't know if they're going to do stuff like this. I kind of hope they don't, but if there's going to be a big reveal in like episode 5 or 6 where it's like, oh, the Nick Fury we've been with for some time hasn't always been Nick Fury, or someone like that. Maybe not Nick, but someone, right?
Hmm.
Um, and I don't know if they're just playing on that, where they're like, oh, just keep you guessing. But like sometimes I like Samuel Jackson, I like what he's putting forward, but I don't like it in the context. I'm like, oh, this is supposed to be Nick Fury. Like I think he's doing well as an actor, but I don't think he's doing well as a pushing. This is Nick Fury to me
Yeah,
all the
because like
time.
Nick Fury's always had like Sam Jackisms throughout his
But he's been pretty straight and narrow,
MCU.
right?
But like until now, it's very like, oh yeah, we're just getting like Sam Jackson Pulp Fiction, you know, like we're just
Yeah.
getting like some
Well,
of that coming through.
was it this episode or was it the last episode? There was one episode where he was very Pulp Fiction for a scene.
I can't
Uh,
remember.
I can't exactly remember.
Probably
I think
last one with the airplane and the threatening the kid and stuff like that.
right. Yeah,
Probably that.
I think also maybe the diner scene when he met Rhodey in episode 2 as well. That gave me kind of Pulp Fiction vibes as well. Could just be
Yeah,
because they're in a diner, but like, well, not a diner, but like at a table. But I got kind of Pulp Fiction vibes then as well. But this definitely gave me like Django Unchained vibes.
yeah,
But I mean, it's fine, and I like that. Like you say, they're at least using the Maria Hill thing as a plot, like to push the plot in some way, or to create friction between characters, or to kind of get Nick Fury by the balls.
yeah,
But again, I don't think there's the emotional reaction there should be from that situation. There is the tension or the stakes associated with that in terms of where it could go future, but I don't think there's the stakes in terms of oh Nick Fury's actually like upset about this, like
Mhm.
which I normally wouldn't want, right? Like I would because Nick Fury hasn't really been an emotional character up to now, but when you're pushing that narrative that and that's what you're putting forward is that Nick Fury's a broken guy who is now an emotional character. It feels odd to push that in some directions, but not others that would make sense.
yeah,
I
yeah. No,
think
okay.
I think as well. I think it could just be a preference thing because like we discussed this in episode 1 or 2, you and me. I think maybe Robert. I don't remember exactly what he thought about it, but about humanizing Nick Fury and like
Mhm.
your view on that. And to me, I really didn't need Nick Fury humanized,
Yeah,
and all the scenes with him and his wife, and I think they do well as like a duo. But I can't help but think where I'm like, I actually didn't ask for this, and I actually don't really give a shit in the end.
yeah,
Like I'm glad that like so the other scene. So like at the very if we're gonna bring it right back to the beginning, is the you have Amelia Clark wakes up, she walks off, and then you're in 2012 Paris, just after the New York attack, right?
Again, the agent looks phenomenal.
It looks great, yeah. I mean, obviously
Crazy.
it's not pushed as far, and I think a lot of that is maybe the makeup they're doing on Samuel
But like
Jackson.
he looks straight from like Avengers 1,
Yeah,
like the first Avengers movie. He looks straight from there, and it's
I
mental.
think part of that helps as well is that they're overdoing the makeup in the present day. So
Yeah,
when
for
they
sure.
undo it, it looks better in comparison, which
Yeah.
obviously helps. But like you say, it looks pretty flawless as well.
Mm.
But like that scene, like I didn't need to know that Nick Fury had a nice dinner with his wife not long after. Like when the other guys were getting shawarma, he was off in Paris. Like I didn't need to know that, you know. Like
Yeah.
it feels like I don't know. Like I didn't need this. It seems like an odd choice. I think it's going to
Yeah,
kind of fall
I
into
get what
that.
you're saying. It's like, do we really need to know his personal life? Like, is that really necessary for this type
You
of
know
show?
how we talked about this episode isn't up yet, but we how in Last Crusade we talked about in our episode we talked about how when you have a character and they're not themselves anymore, or they're not the character that you remember, you can do that, but depending on how long you spend with that character as they were, or how you expect them to be, and how you don't expect them to be, can really change if that works or not. So, for example, we'd said in Last Crusade that even though you get all these elements of Indiana Jones becoming Indiana Jones at the very beginning in the prologue,
All right.
it's only 15 minutes, so it works in that context. It doesn't absolutely work for me, but it works better than, say, Solo does, where the whole film is Han Solo becoming Han Solo. So for most of the film, he doesn't feel like Han Solo until
Yeah.
closer to the end. I'm starting to feel a bit like this, but not in a prequel sense, where I feel like we're going to get Nick Fury at the end of this season, but I'm not feeling like we've been with Nick Fury along the way, you know? And I feel like maybe if you
Yeah.
had a couple episodes of that where it's like, oh, Nick Fury's not himself, but he'll be back soon. I'd have rather had that with like 2 or 3 episodes, and then we know, right, Nick Fury's back, baby. We're gonna spend like 3 more episodes, and it's gonna be badass. But like episode 4's here, and I'm still getting the vibe that this is not the Nick Fury we knew. And I don't necessarily want the one that exactly the one we knew, but he doesn't even feel like the same
Yeah.
character all the time.
I'd honestly take, like, instead of Nick Fury's family life, I'd rather have a buddy cop show of him and Talos. You know, if we just didn't have that either, because
Yep.
they weren't together for most of episode two because they fell out, and now he's dead. So it's like, well, that's that over with. You know, that's that duel done with. But like that's, I don't know. I think that just would have worked better, but yeah, no, I get your point though. It doesn't feel
Yeah.
absolutely necessary. But at the same time, it's like maybe people do want it. I'm really curious what people think. Like, do they like knowing more about Nick Fury? Because the thing for me, I liked how he was like the unknown entity. Like you don't know anything about him. He's just some random dude who made the Avengers. You know, it's like how much like government power does he have? You know, um, I like that though. I like that about him.
Yeah.
I'm
And
not
we've
sure how much I like knowing about too much about him, but at the same time, like I can't lie, it does add to his character. You can't deny it doesn't. But does it take away from the mystique that he had before? You know. So, for
right.
example, my favorite character of all time is Yoda. I don't want to know everything about Yoda because I prefer not knowing everything. You know, sometimes the unknown is a good thing in film or TV. Because if you explain too much, it just kind of gets boring, and then
Well, this is the thing, right?
you know,
Is I feel like so like in say Iron Man in the post credit scene, Nick Fury just fucking spawns in at that guy's house, and you're like, what the fuck is he doing here? And he's like, I'm making a team, and that's it, right?
yeah,
But I don't think we're gonna get this in this series. But like, this feels like a flashback where they're like, oh. We're gonna have like a flashback of Nick Fury talking to his wife, where he's like, "Oh, Earth needs some heroes, and I've found Stark. I'm gonna go see Stark." And then you
mm,
like see him walk up to the door of like Stark's house, like like it's not. I don't think they're going to do that, but it feels like that's the kind of vibe that they're going for
yeah,
with a lot of these flashbacks. I'm like, they don't actually feel that earned. I think the problem with this one as well is they set up this poem, right? That Priscilla, I think Priscilla's his wife's name, right?
yeah, sure.
No,
I'll look it up while you talk.
I get the names
No,
are
you're right. Yeah, Priscilla
yeah
is.
Priscilla, right? So she's a fan of poems or and poetry or whatever, and she tells him a poem, and he's asking about a poem in Paris or whatever, and then they bring it back in the present day when they're gonna kill each other. The problem is, like, you've only set that up like 4.5 minutes ago, and then
Yeah,
you're instantly resolving that, like not resolving that, but you're bringing it back. You're like reprising that theme of the poetry way too quick. Like this should have been, if you were gonna do that, this should have been done a few episodes ago. I feel like where like you're setting up like that poem and that because like in so for like Interstellar is maybe a good comparison with the poetry, where you have the um is it Dylan Thomas poem with like rage against the dying of the light sort of thing,
right.
and that's like a reoccurring thing, and it gets set up with Michael Caine, and it comes back when they go into the black hole and stuff. But
Mm,
like that sticks, but like I just don't. I feel like this was like followed through way too quick, where it was like, oh, we're setting up that there's this poem that they share and that they're both aware of, and that they're aware of the importance. Like Nick Fury's aware of the importance that has to her, and I actually kind of like the message behind the poem for her as a Skrull. I feel like it kind of makes sense, right? Where it's like, oh, like I'm like beloved, like call me beloved, I call the Earth beloved or whatever, and it's like it's like her way of saying this is I've made my home, and my home is I'm now part of this Earth, right? And I think
Mm.
Earth's an important word in that poem,
Yeah.
specifically Earth, because she's lost her home, and the Earth is not her home, but by being beloved by Nick Fury, she's kind of integrated herself into this new world on the
Yeah.
Earth, and I like that theme, but it goes straight into, oh, they're gonna kill each other, and you're like, oh, okay, and then they do a whole like Han Solo quick draw at the table,
Mm.
and it like I feel like had they given that more time, it would have landed better, but it was so quick, and I just feel like
Yeah.
it didn't. It didn't. I again, I like it on paper, but I don't like it in execution, and I feel that's a kind of a running theme for me and how I view the show. I feel like it's
Right.
at least competent on page, but on screen it's not executed as well as it should be. I don't think.
That's
Um,
fair. That's a good point. I never thought of it that way. But
Although I did,
yeah.
I have a note here, which is this is all I could think of when they were having that conversation. When just after that scene where they both shoot and they're like, "Oh, should we renew our vows or what?" Like, um, I liked it was kind of jokey or whatever, and I liked that they didn't like that was a good character moment I thought anyway. But I liked when she's like, "Oh, would you still love me if I was in my Skrull form?" And all that reminded me of is that dumb fucking question girls ask you with like, "Would you love me if I was a worm?"
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
And and he gives the best reply, which is the Kanye West reply, which is, "I guess we'll never know." Like that's all I could think about. No, in that scene, I was like, "That's the best answer to that
Genius.
question." Well done.
Let's see. Um, so I hinted at something last episode where I had a pretty good idea. Obviously, they can't do this because it's already passed, but I think they had a good opportunity with the show. Because I think, obviously, you'd have to change one big thing, which would be Nick Fury. I think the show should have been set during the blip, I think. Because I think that would be the perfect time for Skrulls to take over, is when most of humanity's been taken out, governments have all crumbled. I think that'd be the perfect time for Skrulls to do. Obviously, the only you'd have to keep Nick Fury alive, but I don't see the problem with that because
the only thing is they'd already shown in was it Cat? No, it wasn't Captain Marvel. Was it the post credits of Infinity War that showed you Nick Fury being blitzed, right?
uh, the Infinity War, yeah, yeah, he gets put to the end of that.
So how would that factor into your
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, I would just not blip him out. Like, keep him
right?
around so he can be in the show. Um, it just feels like why wouldn't they have taken advantage of it
Or
during the blip?
I feel like it should be set sooner after the because I mean obviously the timeline for MCU is kind of fucked, but
Yeah,
this feels like it's a bit longer after the blip anyway, right? Where it's not as soon as everyone's
yeah.
come
It
back.
seems like current time,
I
like
feel like
Marvel.
you're right, and I feel like I agree. Is that it makes sense that the Skrulls, if they were planning an invasion, the blip would make the most sense to do it then because people are
Yeah,
already displaced and disappeared, so they can just replace people who are already gone,
exactly.
and it just makes sense. But
Yeah,
and I actually think they could still play into that, and I think that's probably where that million comes from, maybe. But
maybe.
like they haven't presented that yet, so we can't be sure.
Yeah,
But no, I
and
agree.
like we haven't had anything during the blip yet. I don't think. And I thought that this would have been a cool thing to tie in. And the Avengers aren't a massive deal during this time either, because they're all like depressed. So
Yeah,
you
Captain
know,
America has a beard, and yeah,
yeah, I don't know. Like I thought that would have been pretty interesting, because obviously then you could maybe avoid using the weird superpowers because you don't need to worry about the Avengers right now. Yeah, I don't know, but obviously there's no point going on about it too much. But I thought that would have been a good time to put this show at. Because like, I think that would have been interesting. Like for example, maybe like the UK Prime Minister got blipped but oh wait a minute, no, Skrull's just taken their place or whatever, and they're you know, yeah, just do that way. Maybe not. Maybe that's someone in that amount of power. I mean, they're already doing that anyway. But yeah, I don't know. But
I
I
feel
only got
like
the idea because he was talking to his wife about the blip and how he disappeared for that, and then he came back and he disappeared again. But this time it was voluntary. And I was like, oh, that's. And I just made me remember the blip because I feel like it just gets waved over a lot of the time. It just gets forgotten. Like, oh yeah, that happened. 5 years of nothing happened. It's like, well, tell us a story that happened within the blip. Like, I'm
I
sure
feel like
stuff happened. You know what I mean?
as well. I feel like if they were gonna, because the Disney Plus shows in general have kind of been set ups for new heroes, right? Like
Hmm.
She-Hulk and Moon Knight and all that.
Yeah.
Obviously, we have like WandaVision as well, which is that kind of outlier. But I feel like if you were gonna have a new phase begin, and you were gonna introduce a bunch of characters, new characters that will come together later on, say in Secret Wars or Kang Dynasty,
Hmm.
I feel like it would make sense for heroes to like come around during the blip, right? Because you've got this
Yeah.
massive event, and then you've got I feel like it's a good breeding ground. It's like a good like nursery for young heroes that could maybe go on after after everyone's been rescued from the blip. But
Hmm.
it's a good like nursery for maybe getting some of the younger heroes around. Like I guess they kind of went for that in Ant-Man, but like Ant-Man's set after still. But
Yeah.
like Cassie, like I feel like if you were gonna do that, maybe have Cassie do something during the blip, like kind of thing. But that's way off
Yeah.
topic. But yeah, I feel like in general they've maybe kind of wasted what the blip can offer in terms of introducing new heroes.
Hmm.
And like the lasting problem, I feel like that's maybe like my biggest complaint with this, as well as some of the other things. Like Falcon and Winter Soldier probably touched on this the most, but that's because it was most relevant to that. Is what the fuck happens when everyone comes back? You've got all these
Yeah.
refugees, and it seems
Yeah.
like that problem was like a big focus of Falcon and Winter Soldier, but is now very okay. Like they never really bring it up again, right?
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
don't want to beat a dead horse because like if you're gonna do it, like don't just keep doing the same thing. But I feel like it's like such a big event. It feels weird to just kind of be like, oh yeah, well everyone recovered.
Hmm.
Let's dust that off. Like,
Because they mentioned it in Spider-Man Far From Home as well, where like they make some jokes at the high school where it's like, oh, Jimmy was a little nerd in first year, but now he's older than us and he's a big jock. You know, it's like, whoa, like that's funny though. But this is more serious, and it'd be
yep,
nice to see a
yeah,
more
yeah.
serious tone of that. Just like what Falcon Winter Soldier is about. I wasn't too invested in the Falcon Winter Soldier storyline they were telling with that.
No, it was kind of
Just because it just seems so minor compared to like what they could be talking about. For example, like this, like the whole government system has been
yeah.
corrupt, kind of thing by Skrulls.
I
Like I
feel
think
like
that's just so much more interesting.
what you kind of need. This is more feeling wise rather than actual like content. But you know when you
Yeah,
have, we got this in the Flash, but I'm more thinking of the version in, is it Batman versus Superman, where you have Bruce Wayne's, I almost said Banner, Bruce Wayne's point of view of the Man of Steel fight.
yeah,
I don't want that content. I don't want to see like, oh, some other heroes. I don't want to see Moon Knight's perspective on the Thanos battle.
hmm,
But I guess we kind of got this in Black Widow, right? Or was it Black Widow when like you see Elena get blipped?
I think it was Hawkeye.
Or was it Hawkeye? Right, yeah, you see Hawkeye, right? I kind of think we need more of that. At least, well, I think maybe the time's passed now because we've kind of moved on from the blip. But as soon as the TV shows were coming out, I think we needed a bit more of that with like Moon Knight, maybe like his perspective on the blip. So maybe he didn't get blipped, but like he's around when this happens,
Yeah,
right? And it's like a big anchor point for all these shows or whatever. I feel like it's just a really strange opportunity they just haven't taken. But
because I think they've done some good instances with the blip. So for example, I liked Elena's one where she's just in this house, she washes her face, she gets blipped, she comes back and she finds out freaking her sister's died. You're like, what? You're like that's cool. But I also like what they did in WandaVision with what's her face, Rambo, how she's at the hospital with her mum. She gets blipped. She wakes up and her mum died 5 years ago. And she's like, "Wait a minute, I was gone for like seconds, mate. Like what?
yeah,
Like I like that stuff, but they two feel similar. I like. I compared the blip to Order 66 from Star Wars. Right, it's like this big event that at the time, for example, in Star Wars, they just didn't touch on it until I feel like recently, and now it's like talked about constantly and brought up in
right.
every show, which I like because I love that period. I think the blip should be doing the same. It's like that's a massive deal that happened,
Yep.
not in just Earth, but like the universe. It's like what happened during that, How did that affect people? I feel like we've only touched the surface of what happened, and I feel like the Skrulls could have been a massive part of that, But and then you don't have to worry about setting up all this stuff afterwards because you've set it up during the blip. I don't know. It could again. I don't want to just fanfic it, but
Yeah,
it
yeah.
just seems like they missed the they
There's
missed the trick
potential
here.
there, right? There's
Mm,
unused, untapped potential still there.
yeah.
Um,
Honestly, I can't remember what else happened in this episode besides
a
the
little
stuff
off
we
track,
really mentioned.
but is there anything specific to the episode that you had points
Um, Not too much. My main thoughts are Rudy and Talos' death. I think they're like the two standout sort of talking points. I think we talked a lot about
on? Yep.
those. I think the villain remains just a freaking NPC, just
Yeah.
freaking,
I think he's actually.
just irrelevant, not
I don't think
threatening.
he's not. I don't think he's the worst villain in the MCU, but I think he's very very bland. Like
He's
he's
going to
get.
be forgettable. Yeah, he will be.
But I don't think he's even forgettable in the way of like. So like Ronan's character, I feel like is forgettable in Guardians.
Hmm.
Like he's not like I wouldn't say forgettable. He's not like unique, right? He's kind of just regular power hungry tyrant. Wants more
Yeah,
power. Wants to overthrow his boss, right? But he has a look that is very recognizable, right?
and
He's
the
got
way he
like a kind of iconic
speaks
look.
and
Yeah,
stuff, like he has, yeah. I'm not
he's
going to
got,
defend Ronan, but like he stands out a little bit compared to the other ones.
but Ronan is a step above Gravik,
Yeah,
even though
because
Ronan's one of
Ronan
the
did have
lesser
a
ones.
presence.
Yeah, and
Whether that
Gr-
was like the voice he had and just the
Gravik
stature and the
is
look, like he looked
yeah,
intimidating.
Gravik is a guy with a fade and a down vest.
In an
This whole
English accent.
series, and a not great English accent. Like it's not good, and it's
Yeah,
strange. And I get the stakes are lower because it's a smaller show, but
yeah,
I'm not even saying raise the stakes. I'm saying just find some. Because the thing is, as well, a big part of this for me has been you've got this kind of political thing going on as well. Like they're not touching on the politics, but there's like a political subtext with the Skrulls, right? Where you've got like a faction of people who were loyal to Nick Fury. He let them down, and now they're like, oh well, fuck, what do we do? So a bunch of them have joined Gravik, and some of them are kind of stuck in the middle, and they're all just civilians, right? They're not soldiers, but he's
hmm,
kind of made a militant force out of these civilians.
yeah.
One, you don't see that strain on the civilians. I feel like that needs to be addressed as well. Like you're not seeing the strain that Gravik's militantism is putting on the average Skrull, right? You're
Yeah,
just seeing what's happening to Talos and his daughter. And I guess his daughter could kind of be that average Skrull, but by being his daughter, she's therefore not an average Skrull.
because they I don't know if this was this episode or the episode before, but like Gaia made like a really good point where she's like, I'm on your side, Talos, but like
You're a
Gravik's
pussy.
plan actually works, and your plan doesn't work. It's too like idealistic,
Right.
and it's completely right. Like
Yeah, yeah.
Gravik's plan to win is going to work if he continues. He's already won essentially. He's already infiltrated the government, and then here's Talos like, oh no, I'm just going to tell the president that we helped, and I'm just going to assume he's just going to let us have space to continue living here. It's like, all right, mate,
Which,
sure.
again, but again, like we were saying with the blip, there's potential in that storyline, right? There's potential
Well,
in
yeah,
there. And I
yeah,
don't feel like they're using that either. But I think my main point was is that you've got this kind of when my mind goes to Gravik, what I want Gravik to be, I don't know if this is just my fucked up head, but I want like a Charles Manson kind of idea, right? He's kind of a bit like I don't want like Charles Manson in the terms of he's just wacky off the wall. Like Charles Manson, if you actually watch videos of him and you don't just read about Charles Manson, you actually watch Charles Manson. He's very like he's oddly like it's strange. He's charismatic, but not in the way you would assume charismatic people are. Like you would regularly think of charisma. He obviously has a way with attracting people, certain people to him, like fucked up people, right?
yeah,
And I feel like that's what Gravik kind of should be. He should be that kind of out of left field militant guy who's willing to give these people in need answers, but we've never had that perspective with Gravik where I don't believe that the Skrull people, even if he has a good idea, I don't believe that his demeanor and his charisma and his words and his speeches, I don't feel like they are worthy of attracting the force that we're being shown.
Yeah.
And I think that comes into his presence is that we're not being shown like a Charles Manson who can attract a bunch of people to do his bidding, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're being shown a guy who's apparently that, but is very bland and like on screen and doesn't have the presence. But like, if you're in a room with Charles Manson in the '60s and he's like, "Well, I'm gonna sit my dogs on you," basically, right? Like, you're gonna shit your pants. But
Yeah.
I feel like if you're in a room with Gravik and he's gonna sit his dogs on you, you're like, "Oh, I'm gonna die in the most bland way fucking possible." Like,
Mm.
you know, that's what I want from this character is someone who's willing to give these needy people answers that they probably wouldn't want in any other scenario, but they're forced to take his hand. And I feel like they're missing a big opportunity here as well. With why are people going to his side specifically, and why are they drawn to him? Because there's nothing about him that I feel believable in. Like, oh, I believe that he can garner a force of this size. Obviously, I don't think that million that Talos was talking about are all with Gravik. Like, he obviously has smaller
Yeah.
factions. He's obviously a smaller faction of that million. But still, like, there's a lot of people there, right? And they're all refugees, and they may just want a home, but there's obviously going to be some propaganda and stuff going on as well behind it, right? Where they're like, oh, we don't know what's going on. We don't know what Gravik's doing. We just want a home. Like, show us some of that. Like, I feel like we're not getting enough of that as well to be like, oh, like they even did this with in Moon Knight, the bad guy in Moon Knight, right? Ethan Hawke. He kind of had that, right? He had that kind of like, oh, a people's person. It might not have been genuine, and it might not have been that he was actually a good guy, but he at least had that. You could kind of see why people were drawn to him, sort of thing, and why he garnered this community.
Yeah.
I feel
Yeah.
like that's what Ethan Hawke is bringing versus what I don't know what the actors who's playing Gravik is, but
Not sure.
um, regardless of actors, just the character of Ethan Hawke's character in Moon Knight is bringing something that Gravik is not. And actually, when you compare them, they're actually not too dissimilar characters, right? In terms of
Yeah.
they're building these communities. Um, but yeah, I feel like
Yeah.
that's probably the biggest. I think definitely this show, the biggest. I think the biggest issue is Gravik by far.
Yeah. Especially when they constantly keep saying like, "Oh, Talos doesn't have it anymore. Gravik's the new leader." But like you mentioned last episode, Talos has more screen presence, so it's like
Yep.
as an audience, I'm not feeling the same as
But
what you're telling
we
me. You
we're
know?
being told the exact opposite, right? We've been told that Talos can't handle himself, and that Gravik is able to hold himself one on one against Talos, and that's why people are drawn to Gravik over Talos. But when you put them in
Mm-hmm.
a room, Talos is completely overshadowing him, like
Yeah.
absolutely. It's really strange to see that kind of like disconnect. But I did have another point I wanted to touch on, but I forgot.
I
Is there
think
anything else you wanted to?
yeah,
Is it,
I think I've said my piece on this one.
it's really
Methinks.
gonna annoy me if I can't think of that. But fuck, that's gonna annoy me.
Closing statements then.
Yeah, we may as well. I reckon that's gonna annoy the fuck out of me.
So I think we're on the same page. I think we're annoyed at the same sort of stuff.
Oh yeah,
Um,
I'll feed this into my closing statement, but you finish yours.
that's fine. Yeah, I didn't. I think I wasn't too bothered with the ending as you were, besides the Talos stuff, because as we're both on the same page of like he's the best part, why take it away from us? It feels like there's going to be a void rather than like we I don't want to repeat ourselves, but we discussed like the difference of there being purposely an emptiness versus oh you just took the only thing I liked away. Um,
Yep.
so yeah, I think it's gonna be one of those episodes where depending on the future episodes, it's going to dictate if this one was good or not because we just don't know if we're going to like it after. We don't know if the decisions they made are going to be worth making to continue the show. So yeah, it's kind of hard to judge. I'm probably just gonna put middle of the line for me, but yeah, what about yourself?
I think this was the first episode where I started to see maybe that this show's a bit messily put together. And it started to feel messy for me towards probably the middle, towards the end of this episode. Where the rest of the show is at least felt a bit slow in times, but at least coherent, where it felt like I kind of knew where the trajectory was of the show. And then, even to episode 3, when you killed Amelia Clark, I felt like I knew not where that was going, but I was on board for the direction we were headed. And then they did a 180 on that, and I was like, oh shit, okay, right, well, it's annoying, but I can buy it and do the rest of the show. And then they kill Talos, and I'm like, okay, well, that's another 180, so I'm going in this direction now. And it really feels like this episode meandered quite a lot. It really didn't. I feel like this is maybe where it starts. It feels like it's starting to unravel a bit, where you have got these separate plot threads, and I feel like another thing I didn't bring up about this earlier was Olivia Colman is not in this episode,
Yeah.
and I feel like it's an odd choice to have her have something going on with her in the first few episodes, and then you have this episode now where we haven't actually seen her in a good while. And it's like, well, what the fuck is she doing at this point? Like, I feel like you're starting to lose threads along the way. Like, obviously she's going to come back in the next couple episodes, but I feel like it's going to be too late to remember what she was doing then, because it's going to be like 2 or 3 episodes since we've seen her. It feels like that's starting to happen, where we're starting to like concentrate on maybe a couple of threads, which are maybe not strong, but at least we're focusing on something. But now we're starting to lose things along the way, and it starts to feel a bit messy. And that's kind of vibe I got for this episode, is that it really started to lose me. So I think I kind of have to, like, I think there was highs in this episode, and there was some lows, obviously we've talked about it, but I do feel like this was probably the worst episode so far, in terms of just coherence as well, because at least the other ones were coherent. I was never, like, taken out. This one I really, a few times where I was like, oh fuck, like, what? You know? So, and not in a good way, not in a way of like, oh fuck, like, they've done that really well. Like, that's annoying.
Yeah.
Just in a way where I was like, oh fuck, well, you know, I can see the ropes and pulleys, all that jazz. It's I don't know. I mean, I think we can, like you say, again, it's going to really depend on how episode 5 and 6 take what we have, and if they're good, it's going to make me have a proper opinion, more positive opinion of the previous episodes than this one as well.
Yeah.
The problem is, I feel like it's getting tougher for them to. They're making it tougher for them as they go, to make a satisfying ending that's going to clear up enough of these threads where I'm happy with where the season's going to end. Because obviously Loki was just put forward as a season, right? And then at the end of the season, they were like, "Oh, we've got season 2," and that's kind of set up, right? I'm getting similar vibes from this, because I don't feel like they can clear up this problem in 2 episodes. And at least with Loki, I was like, "Oh, well, if this ends after 1 season, I mean, at least the story's over, right? Like, they can continue it, but like right up until the end, I feel like it probably could have been closed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Until they set up the whole big like heel turn where it's like, oh, Kang's statues in the TVA. But I felt like that could have closed the episode, and after that season finished, I feel like there's almost no way for this to resolve itself in 2 episodes. So I'm like going into it thinking, well, I know that some of these plot threads are going to carry on forward, and obviously it's the MCU, so there's always going to be plot threads that carry on. But I don't feel like there's going to be enough cleaned up unless they have a couple of stellar episodes. I really don't feel like, if it keeps this quality, I think they're really going to struggle to pull this off.
My guess is that Gravik's going to bite it, but his lasting impression is going to kind of live
His
on.
message will live on.
His goals and accomplishments are going to live on. I don't think the Skrull situation is going to be fixed in this season, but I think he will be. I don't see him returning post this. But again, who knows?
It's hard, right? Because part of me is like, well, maybe if they keep Gravik around, they can maybe rescue him later on down the line and give him a bit more character. But
maybe
the other part of me is just like, well, he's not working, so just get rid of him. Like, so I think that's kind of where I'm sitting just now. Is Gravik probably needs to go, and they need someone with a bit more. The other thing is we still have our mystery man, right? Like, I don't know if that mystery man.
So.
That doesn't seem like that was Rhodey to me. It seems like there's someone above them.
Yeah.
But like, man, fuck knows. I don't even know if I care anymore.
Doctor
like,
Doom. Imagine if they just dropped him out of nowhere. That'd be kind of metal. But I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not got those expectations. I don't have that. No, holding them. I just know he's a big part of Secret Wars, apparently. So
It's Mephisto. It's Mephisto behind the
Mephisto,
Skrulls.
you heard it here first.
Yep.
Probably not.
No.
But yeah, well, I guess we'll see you next week and see how it continues
Yep.
onwards.
And we'll see if Mr. Robert would like to join us, and
Yeah.
if not, it might be 7 episodes when we do a little Robert catch up. But
Yeah,
if you're watching this, I mean, I don't know if you've been watching Secret Invasion, Leslie, but I hope you've been watching our episodes on it. So
I know, right?
we've forgotten to give you a few shout outs, but hi Leslie, and hi everyone that isn't Leslie.
Burry Burrows, we see you down in the comments.
He's not gonna watch. Mate, he doesn't watch this.
He's not watching it this
He just
far.
fucking camps the videos and just griefs us. No wonder your wife left.
Burry Burrows, if you get this far, you let us know.
We should. I think we should start dropping these hints and just seeing if our friends actually watch our episodes.
I know, right? There's no way. We've seen the watch time. We know no one's.
Oh yeah, we know your watch time, audience.
We know the watch time.
Who's watching our videos for 30 seconds? Are we not entertaining enough for you, motherfuckers?
Are you not entertained?
Are you not? Yeah. Fucking yeah. I mean, obviously that probably says more about us, but like, man, fuck you guys. I'm not gonna make a more quality product just so you can enjoy it better.
Yeah, those blurry thumbnails.
That's not how shit works, bro. Yeah.
TDB.
We still get the view. We still get the view.
Alright, we still got the view, so we'll take that.
But yeah, we'd like some watch time, please. We'd like some watch time. So if you've watched an hour and 6 minutes and 30 seconds, congratulations. You're the only motherfucker that's watched one of our videos. But yeah, so that was episode 4 of Secret Invasion.
Only 2 more to go.
We have 2 more to go, and I'm starting to see the seams, but I'm hoping that they kind of reconstitute and that we have a good finale. Because again, I don't want to go like I'm not like, even She-Hulk. I'm not even wanting to go like I didn't hate watch that by the end. I wanted it to work, and it didn't. And this is the same now.
I was watching that show from episode 2 onwards. It's just like...
I don't want to be hate watching Secret Invasion if Talos is gone, you know? Like, I want to be enjoying this show.
I want to give it a chance. Because like, I think Talos was our favourite part, but we've established, like, we still like Nick Fury. We like Gaia. You know, there's good parts still left. It's just that he was the best part. And it's going to kind of suck not having him around anymore.
I think now that Talos is dead, you need Nick Fury to get that fucking eye patch out the fucking top drawer.
Yeah.
And you need to get his knuckle dusters on, and you need a fucking Nick Fury. He needs to step up. Because if Nick Fury's not in this, like if we're not even going to get proper Nick Fury and no Talos, I think I'm going to struggle to like these new 2 episodes unless they really...
Yeah.
Unless they're spectacular, you know? Like, unless it's actually good stuff. I think kind of, like, everything that everything we've kind of liked so far is now gone, so...
Exactly.
But we're not going to go... I'm going to try and keep it unbiased, and, you know... Talos is gone, and I'm not gonna hate on it too much for that. If they do something good, they do something good, but...
We'll judge accordingly.
I'm just pissed off. I'm just riled up. But, yep, that's episode 4. Thank you for watching, and thank you for being here, Brandon. It's been 2 back-to-back episodes.
Yeah, man.
And
Sweet.